I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed these wooden boxes scattered all over Saint Denis in Red Dead Redemption 2? They're made entirely of wood, reinforced with metal. There's a small padlock at the top, a chain, and a metal fitting on the side, right where a hose would connect. Can you guess what it is? If you guessed fire hydrant, you've got a good eye, my friend. But here's what's wild. Once I realized what they were, I tried to look these up, just to see what they actually looked like at the time. I searched museum archives, old fire equipment catalogs, engineering diagrams, all from my laptop, mind you, and this thing almost doesn't exist. No photographs, no surviving examples. After hours of digging, I could only find one drawing. Take a look at this. Near exact recreation. Same iron banding, same lock placement, same side fitting. And this isn't just some generic late 1800s fire hydrant. Oh no. This specific design is exactly what New Orleans, the city Saint Denis is largely based on, would have used at the time. And I would bet that this is the drawing Rockstar used to design this box. I also spent a couple of hours mapping out where these hydrants actually are in Saint Denis, and they're not where you'd expect. But they are there for a very specific reason. We'll get to that, because this one detail is part of a much bigger system. So today I want to show you 7 more of these tiny details in Red Dead Redemption 2 you weren't meant to notice. Details you've walked past 100 times. Some of them are cool, some of them are kind of gross, and one of them remains a complete mystery to me. So let's take a look at something you've probably glanced at without ever really thinking about: the mystery machine. I'm standing in the Bastille Saloon in Saint Denis, and have you ever noticed this machine behind the bar? The first time I saw this, I thought, oh wow, cool, an ice machine. That's fancy. But then I looked up 1800s ice machines, and those things were the size of entire buildings, so it's definitely not that. Then I thought maybe it was some kind of glass washer. It's right beside the glasses. That would also make sense. Also wrong. So what the hell is this thing? It turns out it's a parlor stove.
What the hell is even that?
A parlor stove was a decorative enclosed cast iron stove designed to heat public-facing spaces. Parlors, hotels, theaters, higher-end saloons. Unlike rough heating stoves, these were meant to be seen. They were ornate, polished. They gave off heat, but they also gave off status. And that's why it's here, behind the bar in the Bastille Saloon. This is a more upscale establishment catering to Saint Denis' upper crust. But that illusion kind of breaks if the same stove is just copied and pasted into every saloon in the game, right? So I walked over to Doyle's Tavern on the working class side of Saint Denis, and guess what? Doyle's Tavern doesn't have a parlor stove. Instead, sitting right in the middle of the room is a potbelly stove. A completely different stove. Potbelly stoves were everywhere in the late 1800s. They heated fast and were common in workshops, factories, and lower income saloons. Unlike the fancy parlor stove over in the Bastille Saloon, which signals status, the potbelly stove signals something much simpler. It's fucking cold and we need a stove. Look at all these different stoves in this game. This game probably holds the record for the most stoves, and maybe holds the record for the only game with a stove store. Crazy stuff. It's a pretty cool touch to have even the heating stoves in a saloon tell the story about social status, and it's these little details when you add them and add them and add them that start to compound, and that compounding effect is what creates a sense of place, a sense of time. But why does any of this accurate history even matter? Because every object around you is the final version of a very long story. Your phone began as a telegraph, your car began as a horse-drawn carriage, and even the toilet you sit on every morning while scrolling your upgraded telegraph looked very different 125 years ago. So let's take a quick bathroom break and talk about toilets. But first, here's a quick word from today's sponsor, HOLZKERN. HOLZKERN are a watch and jewelry brand for men and women founded in Austria 10 years ago. A place known for alpine peaks, world-class design, and an obsession with craftsmanship. Even the name HOLZKERN means wood core, and their logo doubles as a fingerprint, which feels right because no two pieces are the same. Every HOLZKERN piece is made from natural materials, real wood, stone, gemstones, even leaves. They use walnut, marble, tiger's eye, moonstone, materials that already have character before they're even assembled. The watch I'm wearing has an actual marble face. I've had it for over 5 months now, and you can spot it in some of my older videos, and there's something about a real analog watch with real visible gears doing actual work that gives me this weird sense of calm. I haven't put on my smartwatch since. Also, speaking of clocks, have you ever noticed that every single clock in Red Dead actually tells the in-game time? Even these little clocks on the mantles. HOLZKERN also sent me this onyx necklace, which has a nice understated vibe. Everything's crafted in small batches, so when a design sells out, that's it. It would also make for a great Valentine's Day gift. It feels unique and intentional, whether it's for a partner, an anniversary, a graduation, or honestly just for yourself. Every piece comes with a 2-year guarantee, free express shipping worldwide, arrives in 3 to 5 business days, and US custom fees are fully covered. Click on my link in the pinned comment or description and use my code BANDERCOOT for 15% off all purchases site-wide. And if you order by February 14th, you'll also get a free Valentine's gift sachet. Thank you HOLZKERN for sponsoring today's video, and now let's move on to toilets. You know what's nice? Getting up in the morning, dropping a little in the toilet, flushing, and never having to think about it again. I go about my day, I make breakfast, I run errands, and somewhere out there, that little turd begins a journey to the center of the earth, or wherever it goes. I get to be blissfully ignorant of its path after it leaves my body. But in 1899, they didn't have that same luxury that we have today. If you woke up and needed to go to the bathroom, you had two main choices. Choice A was the outhouse, which in a crowded city or a rural frontier meant sharing a wooden hole with your neighbors, which wasn't always the safest bet at night. Or choice B. If you've ever spent any time in the rented rooms or high-end hotels in Red Dead 2, you've probably seen these. Little pots on the floors and these wooden cabinets. This is what was known as a commode or a close stool. See, even for the wealthy in 1899, indoor plumbing was a chaotic, unreliable mess. Full sewage systems were still being laid down, so instead of pipes, waste was handled through portable containment. If you were poor, you had a simple ceramic pot. You did your business and it sat there. But Victorian society was obsessed with propriety. They hated the idea of the unmentionables. A plain pot in the corner was crude and lower class. So if you were a person of status, the kind of person who might have owned a parlor stove, you bought a piece of furniture to hide your shame. These cabinets were designed to disguise their function. When the lid was closed, it looked like an ordinary nightstand or a fancy chair. But yeah, these don't have pipes, as you can see. Having a commode in your room meant that every single morning, someone, usually a servant or a hotel chambermaid, had to manually remove that pot, carry it through the halls, and empty it into a cesspit or a municipal waste cart. So to us, this little box doesn't mean much, but to Arthur Morgan, it's the height of urban sophistication. And once again, we see Rockstar putting in the work to define class through these little details. But the Old West wasn't all sophistication. Some people just didn't know any better. So let's talk about bar towels. Welcome back to the Bastille Saloon. This time I want you to look right here at these hanging towels. A towel in a bar isn't strange on its own. Bartenders need to wipe things down, and sure enough, we've got rags behind the bar. In this era, bars didn't have glass washers and they didn't have dedicated sinks for cleaning glassware. Glasses were wiped with these rags and then reused over and over. But what are these rags on the customer side? Well, these were known as community towels, sometimes called mustache towels. They were used to mop up spills on this side of the bar, but they were also used for something else. Their job was to wipe beer foam off your face. Hence, mustache towel. And then they'd go right back onto the hook all day, used by whoever came next. Imagine going down to your local Applebee's and using a napkin that had already been used by 6 people that night. Eek. But people knew way less about germs back then. Before making this video, I'd never even noticed these towels. They're in almost every bar in the game, but they don't really jump out, probably because they're towels. And having spent a ridiculous amount of time in this bar for previous videos, I can tell you that the level of detail here is unhinged. Look at the animation for eating food in this game. Someone at Rockstar animated every single forkful that gets eaten off a plate. Bite for bite. And these little details are everywhere. From the bar corkscrew to these old drink dispensers, to the wine bottles behind the bar, the same brand of wine with different years just to mark different vintages. But I want to show you a couple more details that have real history behind them. Stuff I didn't know anything about before making this video. And one of them is the barber pole. This is very cool. In Saint Denis, the barber poles are red, white, and blue. But if you head out to places like Valentine or Blackwater, they're just red and white. What you're looking at here is what barber poles actually looked like before they turned into these clean, glowing things we recognize today. The person who cuts your hair now, the one you make awkward small talk with, used to have a much bigger role. Barbers perform dentistry, surgeries, and bloodletting. If you don't know what bloodletting is, they used to drain people's blood from their bodies to treat infections and illness, and it was the most common form of surgery for about 2,000 years. Right up until the 19th century when people realized, oh, if you take a person's blood, they won't live. For example, George Washington went in with a sore throat and they drained 40% of all the blood from his body, and he died from it. Imagine going to the doctor today with a sore throat and the doctor's like, okay, hear me out here. We drain all the blood from your body and we see what happens. Oh shit, he's just skin now, guys. And that's where the colors come from. Red for blood, white for bandages and cloth. They would hang stained linens outside the shop. Eventually those cloths got wrapped around the posts, and eventually that turned into painted stripes. The blue showed up later. It represented veins and also the red, white, and blue of the American flag. Saint Denis gets the red, white, and blue because it's a proper city, more polished, more cosmopolitan. Valentine and Blackwater keep it simple because they're practical in smaller places. They care less about what it represents and more about whether you can tell it's a barbershop. And I just find it so cool that they added not one but 2 different types of pole. I don't know. I feel if I was a graphic artist, I'd just copy and paste the same pole from place to place. I guess I'd be working at Ubisoft. So now the mystery item I mentioned earlier, the newspaper board. Red Dead Redemption 2 is full of newspapers. You've got paper boys, you've got newspaper kiosks, but then there are these unmanned street corner newspaper boards. And I tried to track these down, this shape and style, and I couldn't for the life of me find any real world record of them existing like this. And I don't believe Rockstar just made this up. This had to come from something. So if there are any eagle-eyed historians out there who recognize these early 1900s newspaper boards, I'd love to know what we're looking at here. Okay, let's go back to the fires in Saint Denis, because I want to show you something that didn't jump out at me at first. This map where I laid out all the wooden fire hydrant boxes across Saint Denis. At the time, it just looked dense, like, okay, they're everywhere. Old city, lots of fire risk, makes sense. But then I started paying attention to where they actually are. Most of them cluster around brick and plaster buildings. And then you look a few streets over, areas with way fewer hydrants, and suddenly everything's wood again. At first I thought this might just be coincidence, but the more you look at it, the harder it is to ignore, because even the seemingly random placement of all these hydrants is steeped in history. By the late 1800s, New Orleans had a real understanding of the devastating effects of fire. In 1788, a massive fire destroyed around 80% of the city. 6 years later, it happened again. At the time, New Orleans was basically a tinderbox. Mostly wooden buildings, open hearths, candles, tight streets. Both fires likely started inside ordinary homes. And when New Orleans rebuilt, they took this into consideration. Wood construction was restricted or outright banned in central areas. And that's why the city starts to split visually. The places that burned the worst became denser, heavier, more fire resistant. And these places that are mostly brick are where most of these hydrants are. Isn't that crazy? There's other signs of fire prevention techniques all over the game too, and of course those are also rooted in class distinction with different designs. I don't mean to keep hammering the same point over and over again, but I was genuinely floored by the amount of thought that went into creating this world. I barely left Saint Denis and the number of details rooted in real history is overwhelming. However, what did surprise me is that this game doesn't have any actual fire department. Besides this little sign right here in Saint Denis, there's no brigade that will come and actually put out a fire. Now I thought it would be a fitting end to this video to end it where it's going to end for all of us one day. The graveyard. I have a deep fascination with graveyards. Whenever I travel and visit a new place, I always try to make a point of visiting the graveyard. And I'll tell you why. Today we're alive and most people you know are alive, and in 100 years we'll all be dead. Forever. And for a little while after that we'll exist. Our kids or grandkids will mention us, we'll show up in photos, but then another 100 years will pass, and then another, and slowly over time you stop being remembered. Completely. But when you walk through a graveyard and read people's names, even though you'll never know anything about them, where they were born, what kind of life they lived, you can be certain of one thing. You know where they ended up. There's a feeling I get when I read those names that I can't really explain. There's almost a weird comfort I get knowing that everyone there is dead, but it's still okay. Like the world doesn't end when you do. And what I love about video game graveyards is they don't really mean that, and yet they're a simulation of that final resting place. They're these weirdly haunted places that are also not haunted at all because nothing is actually buried here, though I wouldn't put it past Rockstar to have actual skeletons under the dirt. In terms of tiny details, you'll notice that all of these gravestones are above ground, so technically it's a mausoleum, which is accurate to New Orleans because of the high water levels. There also aren't many named graves here, though I did see a potential stray dog looking for his long lost owner. But as I was leaving and walking down the street, the sun hit a bench in a specific way that pulled me toward it, and I found this. In Memoriam, Matt J. Rennie. A quick Google search tells you he worked at Rockstar on multiple games, and this simulated memorial to a real person who worked on these worlds is such a beautiful tribute. And I just stood by this bench for a few minutes. It honestly gave me more of a real feeling than most real-life memorials I've seen, because it's so intimately tied to its place and its time. And it will always exist here in this digital world, and anyone in the real world can just fast travel here and take a moment and pay respects. And that's a very beautiful thing to me. So thank you, Matt, for contributing to some of the most real moments many of us have ever had, because it's these tiny details stacked on top of one another that turn virtual worlds into places that feel lived in. And that's one of the many reasons I love video games. Thank you for watching.